to the other NFC game that will be on Sunday, and it will be in Detroit. Detroit gets another home playoff game, so kudos for those fans. I'm sure they'll be very excited for that, as they are favored by 6.5 points, hosting the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So who do you have here, John, and for how much?
I'm going with Tampa. I'm not totally sold that Tampa loses this game. I would probably bet that Detroit can come out on top, but I do think that if there's any game that I would expect to be an upset, and I'm not counting the Chiefs-Bills because we've seen those teams battle. I don't think either team winning that game would be considered an upset in my opinion. But if out of the other three, I think the most likely upset would be Tampa over Detroit, because stylistically, I've compared Detroit and Philly a couple times, and I don't think that Detroit is necessarily collapsing like the Eagles have been, but in terms of strengths and weaknesses, they're kind of the same, like bad secondaries, solid defensive lines, stuff like that. And I just think that ultimately Tampa is kind of built to take advantage of that. They're built to kind of exploit some of those weaknesses that teams, like Detroit have. And so it'll be interesting. Like I said, if I had to pick, I'm still expecting the Lions to win the game, but I do think that Tampa certainly has a really good shot, and for that reason, I'm definitely taking them to cover another 400.
I'm right with you in all aspects. I'm putting 600 on Tampa Bay. I think we saw a little bit last week. Puka Nacua had a great game, and and the Rams are right in it. And I think Tampa Bay too. We mentioned Rams. I mentioned the Rams defense for last week. Finally, we saw that they got overpowered a bit, especially early by the Lions offensive line. But like I mentioned with the Tampa breakdown, they just faced Philly going to Detroit. I think this defensive line is going to be able to slow down that run game, put more of the onus on Jared Goff in the drop back pass game. And we've seen it can be mixed results. Now, granted, it's in a dome, so you don't have to worry about weather playing a factor in too. So that could help the Lions. But then, like we mentioned before, outside of Amon-Ra St. Brown, who really scares you? And I feel like Tampa Bay is going to try to do a good job. They got good corners in Jamel Dean and Carlton Davis, so I'm sure I expect to be more Davis. He's more of the physical, shifty type corner to be on Amon-Ra. And then after that, I'm just not sure who really scares you there. Big question mark, though, and one of the reasons why I'm scared about Tampa, too, is on the flip side, as long as their offense can really Baker just take care of the ball. Because they did another two teams that played earlier this season. That game was a little bit closer than the score indicating. It was 20-6 Lions, but it was early in the season. Tampa was still finding their way offensively. They've obviously found that in this last few weeks as they've been hitting in stride, and it's not just been feeding just Mike Evans and Chris Godwin and getting David Moore. He's had a couple of games where he's made some plays, and even Rachaad White's been a little bit quiet the past few weeks, but he can be a playmaker, and they're very good at getting him out on screens / some short passes to get him involved. So I just feel like Tampa Bay, like you mentioned, stylistically is just going to be like you mentioned, it's very similar kind of weaknesses for Philly and Detroit, and that's they just beat Philly, so I feel like they're gonna have a good idea of what to anticipate going up against Detroit. Now, granted, obviously this one not being at home, so maybe that plays a factor, but I'm extremely confident in the Buccaneers. Biggest bet of the weekend, like I said, 600 on them to at least cover. I'm more with you where I think that they can pull off the upset here and get the Lions here napping, because do I know two Lions outside of Aiden Hutchinson, no one else on that front four, especially pass rush wise. Ooh, that's a tough one. Really scares you outside of Aiden Hutchinson, and Tristan Wirf's good, and usually Tampa has a good idea of keeping in a tight end to chip and help out if Aiden Hutchinson lines up elsewhere. But we'll see if Detroit can get the second win at Ford Field in as many weeks, keep that little hot streak going, or if Baker can continue his little career rival here